So somebody once said it's as if Slack and ChatGPT had a kid. I think that's a pretty good description, right? In a single thread, imagine, Jack, you and I are talking, and then we decide to bring in an AI. I bring in an AI, and then you bring in an AI. We could talk to each other. We could each talk to the AIs. We can ask the AIs to comment on each other. When the AIs do produce a response, they will take our conversation into account as part of the context, and we can bring in documents. We could bring in whatever we're working on and make it part of the conversation.
Welcome, France. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Boodle?
I'm France Hong, co-founder and CEO of Boodle AI, the makers of Boodlebox. We're on a mission. We're on a mission to make the world's best platform for collaboration between humans, AI, and knowledge.
Fantastic. And in this conversation, I want to get super deep into Boodle, the customers, and actually the product itself. And I also want to talk about how organizations think about generative AI. So maybe first, if we could just start with the product, could you maybe walk me through some examples of how customers use the platform?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history about Boodle AI. So we've been doing AI before AI was cool. We've been building AI technology for over half a decade now. We've worked with hundreds of organizations adopting and in some cases failing to adopt AI products. And what we learned along the way was it's not just about the technology. One of the things I like to say is AI actually isn't the answer, but it will be part of the solution. And what I mean by that is just as important as the technology are the people and the processes and the knowledge that exists. And so a little less than a year ago, we decided to reset the company, start over with a new product, and we decided to build the AI product that we would love. That addressed all these pain points that we saw users have in adopting AI. And so the main use of Boodlebox is to be a platform that a team can get on and immediately find value in, immediately adopt it, immediately start collaborating, and solve all the friction points that users have in adopting AI. And we can go through some of those pain points in a little bit, Jack. But in terms of what are users actually using it for, it's a whole bunch of different things, right? And that's probably one of the challenges of generative AI. You can do anything with it, which can be paralyzing for some folks. For organizations themselves, we solve the problems of, gosh, how do I centralize my folks while still giving them choice? How do I speed adoption? How do I make AI collaborative? And how do I create an environment where people can learn from one another?
I guess maybe to put things in perspective for people who don't know you, how do you kind of compare to something they do know, like ChatGPT?
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, how are you different than ChatGPT? ChatGPT obviously is an amazing tool. It really kicked off the generative AI revolution. Though interestingly, that technology actually has been around for a while. What we did was we built a platform that took that chat interface and really put it onto steroids. So ChatGPT is obviously produced by OpenAI. It allows access to the GPT models. We're different in the sense that we give optionality. We're not limited to one ecosystem. Within our platform, you can use OpenAI's models. You can use Anthropic's models like Claude 3 Opus. You can use Meta's models like Llama 3. You can use Google's models like Gemini 1.5. So we give choice. On top of that, we have built over 1,000 essentially custom GPTs so that everyday users don't have to. It's a really powerful part of platforms like Poe or ChatGPT to build your own models. But frankly, there's a lot of people who don't want to do that. They don't want to build their own car to go to the grocery store. They just want to go get groceries. And so we built those models ahead of time. Another difference is even if those models exist, how do I know what model to use? And so one of the things we built was a recommendation engine so that a user doesn't have to know about all these models. They don't have to know what Anthropic is, or they don't have to know what a data analyzer is. They can just type what they want, and the system itself, Boodlebox, automatically recommends the model. So we take that process of selecting your model and make it easy. And then on top of that, we make it easy to incorporate multiple AIs in the same conversation, and then make it easy to incorporate multiple documents, having built a vector database. And then really the creme de la creme, we make it easy for multiple people to participate in one conversation with multiple AIs. And that's a feature that's right now, at least, unique to Boodlebox. I don't expect it to be unique for long. I think as people discover the value of it, other people are going to try to copy that feature. But we built that from day one. The idea that there's strength in diversity.
Fantastic. And just so I'm understanding, basically what you're talking about is being in a window like ChatGPT, having your team in that same conversation thread or prompt thread, and having more than one model in that thread. Is that right?
Yeah. So somebody once said it's as if Slack and ChatGPT had a kid. I think that's a pretty good description, right? Though Slack is an enterprise tool, we're meant to be a tool for any user, and you can have these kind of conversations with anybody. But yes, in a single thread, imagine, Jack, you and I are talking, and then we decide to bring in an AI. I bring in an AI, and then you bring in an AI. We could talk to each other. We could each talk to the AIs. We can ask the AIs to comment on each other. When the AIs do produce a response, they will take our conversation into account as part of the context, and we can bring in documents. We could bring in whatever we're working on and make it part of the conversation. And that's accessible to you, that's accessible to me, and that's accessible to all the multitude of AIs that we're working with.
Oh, that's really interesting. The ability to collaborate is something that is certainly different. And I guess that begs the question, like, who are your customers right now, and kind of why are they coming to you?
Yeah, so we believe, right, we're still in the very early days of this Gen AI revolution, right? We're moving from the early adopter stage. If you think when the first cars came out, the people who were the first owners of cars were also basically mechanics. They had to be able to break, fix anything that broke on the car. And so they were true aficionados. That's equivalent today to the people who are geeking out about, number of transformers or training, data set size. And, here's a better list of 1,000 prompts you can try. These are the early enthusiasts, and they're wonderful. They're driving the adoption, the early adoption of this technology. But now we're moving into the early mainstream phase, which are all the other people, right? I mean, there are people who drive cars that can't fix an engine, and that's the phase we're in. And so what we're seeing is there's a lot of organizations that know they want to adopt Gen AI. So typically our customers it's the leader of a hybrid or remote team. They want their team to use generative AI. Their team already is using generative AI, but not using one. Some people are on ChatGPT, some people are on Claude, some people are using Copilot. They would like to consolidate everybody onto one platform while still giving people choice. They don't want to force people onto one particular ecosystem. They want to find a way to bring in the knowledge they have, their existing files and data, and they want to do that in a way that's secure. And meanwhile, there's a group of people in their organization, their team, that aren't using ChatGPT, aren't using generative AI. They want to bring those people along, and they want to find a way for everyone to collaborate. We solve all those problems in spades. And so we make it easy for an organizational leader to consolidate, to centralize, to adopt, to collaborate, and to do so in a secure, easy manner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think an interesting thing you mentioned there is there's a bunch of people already using these tools within organizations, but there's still a bunch of people, and don't get me wrong, I would say a majority of people who aren't using it yet. What do you think the big challenge is for new users to get involved?
Yeah, so I've touched on some of those previously, but I'll outline them. The first is they don't understand the use cases. I once had someone tell me well, anybody can use ChatGPT. You just type in whatever you want and it just does it. Well, for that person, they just kind of intuitively got how to use the platform. That's a rarity. I think that's 1 out of every 20 people. For most people, staring at an empty chat window is actually intimidating. I don't know where to start. So the first challenge is just knowing what the use cases are. And in fact, there are good use cases and there are bad use cases. And for some people, they pick a bad use case. They have a bad experience. They're like, oh, I tried that ChatGPT thing. I didn't really like the results. Maybe because they were expecting this to do something it couldn't, right? Which is produce an A+ 100% result mind reading. The reality is we don't have the muscle memory to use this technology. We're used to applications where we click a button or we enter a formula or we put in a search term and we get something out and we have to do more work. That's not the way this technology actually should interact with us. And so that first problem of just how do I use this, right? What are the proper use cases is the first friction point. The second is something I already mentioned, which is what AI is appropriate for my use case. Third, right, is how do I prompt this AI to get the thing I want? The fourth is every AI has its strengths, its weaknesses. Some of them tend to hallucinate. Some of them are good at things, certain things, other things. The ability to bring in multiple AIs, just like you'd work with a human team and bring in multiple people to offset strengths and weaknesses, is another challenge. Our platform solves that. There are others who solve it as well. And then the ability to bring in your own organizational data and personalize the results. I was on a call earlier today with someone from a law firm, and they work with a tremendous amount of existing information, and they were trying to use a different large language model, and they were trying to achieve the results just through pure prompting without bringing in their data. Well, that's not going to work, right? Like, you've got all this data in your organization. I told her that large language models can be the smartest dumb person you ever met. Like, they're really good at things, but they don't know anything about your organization. So bringing in that organizational knowledge is another friction point. And then the last friction point, and the one we're trying to really solve, is this friction point of collaboration, right? AI shouldn't drive us apart as people and as teams. They should make us more engaged and collaborate with one another. And there are things I do and I just do myself, but eventually I want to share that or work with somebody or get their opinion, or even better, I would like them involved from the beginning. And can we create a space where AI is a colleague and a coworker and part of our team? And that's what we try to do at Boodlebox, and I believe that's what we built.
Yeah, very interesting. Just to dial back, we run a small business. We use a whole bunch of different tools, and we see the value of actually aggregating those tools into one source and being able to collaborate together. For those people who are trying to decide on behalf of an organization, do you have a particular framework on how to figure out what's best for them?
Yeah. So, if you're looking at the different team generative AI tools, what's out there, right? We've got Copilot, we've got ChatGPT Teams, we've got Poe, we've got some other smaller platforms. You've got Boodlebox. I think you have to ask yourselves first, does model choice matter to you, right? Like, if you're only interested in using ChatGPT or you're only interested in using Microsoft Copilot, then that's fine. Those options are fine, right? And second, you have to ask yourself, how comfortable is your team in using that particular sort of large language models and AI tools? And again, if your team consists of ChatGPT aficionados who are all prompt engineers, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think third, you have to ask yourself, how important is collaboration and this collaborative workspace I mentioned? Again, if it's not that important, then something like ChatGPT Team, where the only thing you need to share is a GPT, is fine. But it is important, then you need to look at something like Copilot or our platform, Boodlebox. And then fourth, right, how important is it to bring in documentation, right? If you want a tight integration with Microsoft products, then Copilot, I think, makes a lot of sense because it's got the tightest integration with Office 365, clearly better than any other product. There are different ways to bring in documentation. For a lot of users that we're talking to, a lot of potential users, they're very concerned about security. They don't want to upload something to a provider who trains models, right? And we're able to tell our potential customers, Boodlebox doesn't train models. So the chance of your data being used by us to train a model is actually zero because we don't train models. So you don't have to worry about that. And by the way, our relationship with our API providers, Anthropic and OpenAI others, your prompts through us are anonymized, and our agreements state that they won't train models based on the prompts that we provide through our API. So, I think Boodlebox actually isn't always the answer if you're looking at a team product. I think it is the right answer if you want a diversity of models, if you want collaboration, if you want to use documents securely and you're concerned about uploading them to a large language model provider, and if you care about collaboration. But if that isn't you, right, if you really care about Office 365 deep document integration, or your team's already very invested and familiar with ChatGPT, then one of the other solutions is probably the right answer.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. One of the things that I'm very curious about this conversation in particular because we've talked a lot about team collaboration. Is how does this kind of play out in, I guess, mid-sized to larger organizations where there is a bunch of job roles that are effectively collaboration roles? I'm thinking about administrative assistants, coordinators, maybe executive assistants. What do you think kind of changes in the workplace with these roles?
Yeah, I think so. This is what something I've learned, we've learned, my team has learned in the rollout of Boodlebox, right? Like, um, who's finding value out of this? Now, initially, you think, oh, it's got to be salespeople and
Hmm.
marketers, like they're the obvious early adopters of technology. In a sense, they're, I mean, they obviously they are using this technology a lot because content generation is an easy use case for large language models. But frankly, they've been using this for a while, right? Jasper's been for a while. Copywriter.ai has been around. So they're actually not phased by this as much. The audience that you just mentioned, right? Like the administrative assistants, the chiefs of staffs, these facilitators, they've not been exposed to this technology. And so they are really enamored with it and they're very creative with it. They're finding all kinds of interesting use cases and they're not looking at it just through the lens of content creation. This isn't just a magic box that produces words. Can I use it to facilitate discussions? Can I use it to analyze documents? Can I use it to take on, I have to generate 50 emails for my CEO. Can I upload all of his emails or her emails and then use that to create a tone and style and voice that then I can generate 50 emails in 15 minutes instead of 15 hours, right? And so they're being really creative with the technology. I find they're actually some of the most enthusiastic adopters at this point.
Is there anything that's particularly like a wow moment for some of the roles or some of the other customer segments?
Yeah, so in our platform, the wow moments, there can be several, but the one that I've consistently seen is where multiple people are engaged in a conversation
Hmm.
inside what we call a group chat, which is a conversation with multiple people and multiple AIs and multiple documents. And they've brought in multiple AIs, they've brought in multiple documents, and at some point they ask the AI to generate something, generate an analysis, generate a summary, generate a new piece of content. And the AI, when it responds, doesn't just respond based on the prompt that asks it to respond. It actually takes into account the entire context of the conversation, including the back and forth between humans. And so I had a moment where it was me and four other people in a group chat. We were just debating the right approach to a particular problem. We asked AI to summarize and give it its best recommendation, which it did. And as part of an answer, it noted that France was unlikely to agree to this based on a comment he had previously made, and it summarized my argument and noted that I would likely disagree with its recommendation. We were like, whoa, right? Like that's kind of meta, right? Like the AI is aware of like I have a different point of view than other people, and from the AI.
Yeah, I think the shocking point for me when I just started using Boodle a week or so ago, but the shocking point for me was getting the context from multiple people and then having input from multiple models without agitating them, without asking them for feedback. So I thought that was in particular very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're moving towards a world where to get the most out of AI, people have been saying this, right? Which is treat AI like a colleague, talk to it like a human. But the reality is, that's only possible if you create an environment where it can see other people talking to other people, right? And where, I mean, if you want it to be a colleague, you got to treat it like a colleague. You got to let it enter our conversations. You've got to ask it its opinions. You got to give it colleagues as well. And that's where it really shines. And so that the experience that you just mentioned is one we hear a lot from our users.
Sure. Excuse me. Is there any particular challenges that some organizations have after they make the decision to use a generative collaborative tool?
Yeah, I think that the challenge is with any new technology, right? Which is it goes from being okay. There's a lot of generative AI that's cool, right?
Right.
There's a lot of things I find that are cool and fun. That doesn't actually mean it's useful, right? And provides value in the long run. So if you go onto LinkedIn, you go onto Facebook, there's on any given day, there's some wow, razzle dazzle, new generative AI development out there, right? And I always ask myself, like, what problem is that actually solving, right? What pain point is that addressing, or what gain point is that providing for? Does anybody care about that? How urgent is that? And is anybody actually willing to pay money for that? Because ultimately, the tools that we build as entrepreneurs need to help people. They need to solve somebody's real world problem that they care about. And so there is, I think, right now, some organizations that are like, I need to adopt generative AI. And, I ask, what for? And they're like, we're not sure, right? And so going through the process of actually asking yourself, what do you want to adopt this for? Or at least educating your user base on the things it could be used for, and then letting them try to tackle those problems, and then bringing them back, right, to talk about that and share the information so that adoption actually moves forward, I think is the principal challenge that organizations have. Because as I mentioned earlier, we don't have experience with this technology. For many people, the first thing they do when they try ChatGPT or Claude or even our platform is they'll enter like 2 words. They'll enter like Chinese restaurant, right? And why do they do that? Because we have 20 years of habits of talking to Google that way. That's actually not the way we should talk to a large language model. And it's certainly not the way we integrate it into our work. So how do we make this actually a colleague, part of our workflows? How do we enable it to solve real world problems? One of my challenges, I built this technology with my company. I forget sometimes, right? Like I'm literally having a conversation and one of my colleagues would be like, we should try Boodlebox for that. And I was like, yes, we should try Boodlebox for that. Why aren't we using Boodlebox for that? We just don't have the muscle memory. Every organization has that problem right now.
That's obviously a muscle that is going to take a lot of time and a whole industry change over the next probably 20 years before we all kind of default prompt before we default search, I think. But I do believe we're at the very beginning of that today.
Yeah, and I think making AI collaborative will go a long way towards that, right? Because then this happens all the time inside Boodle. Somebody will be doing something, we'll share a group chat. So one of the things we'll do at the beginning of Zoom calls is we'll start a group chat and we'll put all the documents, information relevant to that discussion. And as the real life discussion is happening, there's a second discussion happening where people are asking the AI questions, having it ideate, even create drafts. And as people are doing that, there's a third thing that's happening, which is great, which is we're learning from one another, right? Like, even though I've done thousands, tens of thousands of prompts in my time, I'll see somebody do something and be like, wait a second, what did you just do? Right? Like, oh, you just use this bot to do this with this thing and this combined. That's really interesting. And so by making AI collaborative, there's this additional benefit of learning by seeing, right? By watching other people do things. I've been a martial artist my entire life. And in the particular dojo that I studied in Japan, there was only room for 2 people to practice at a time, even though there'd be 20 or 30 or 40 people in the dojo. And when you weren't practicing, you didn't just like smoke and joke or tell stories or look away. You sat on the sides and you watched the people training. And that part of being in the dojo, watching other people train, was actually part of your training, because you're watching them. You're trying to, why do they do that? How do they do that? Collaborative GenAI opens up that opportunity for people to learn by seeing other people do.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you basically see that once an organization adopts, like in a small group, there's a real network effect, because let's say you're in a small marketing team, and there's 2 or 3 people inside the company using it. Well, if we need to go do something, we need to invite XYZ to this conversation as well. Do you see that happening?
It's starting to happen. Yeah, I can see in the logs of the company that there are users who are inviting other users. I don't know who they are, but and they're signing up, and so that is starting to happen. We need to be, frankly, better about that in the platform, make that a more frictionless experience. Right now, Jack, I'd love to tag you in a post and for you to get an email saying, hey, France just mentioned you in this group chat, and give you a snippet. Like that happens on LinkedIn, right? If somebody mentions you, you get this little thing. LinkedIn is providing value to you. It's also, of course, increasing the stickiness of its platform. And so we're not done making Boodlebox as awesome as it can be. We're going to continue to add features. Those features are going to be focused on improving knowledge, multimodal, structured data, that sort of thing, and then improving collaboration, really with an eye towards how do we make this a more meaningful, real-time, and offline experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that's a really good kind of stopping point for this conversation. So if people want to use Boodle, people want to get into the platform, where should they go?
Yeah, just go to Boodlebox, BOODLEBOX.ai, and you can sign up. We've got a free plan that renews every month if you use up your word count, and then it's really easy to upgrade to the paid plan, and not that expensive, frankly, either. It's $14.99 for a starter subscription. As we talked about, Jack, if you were to try to buy ChatGPT, Anthropic, Perplexity, Stable Diffusion, all as separate licenses, that's $80 right there, right?
Yeah.
So even if the platform had none of this other functionality, simply the consolidation of costs down and having access to all those things in one place makes it a good value. Of course, we do offer all those other things as well, which is the real value we're building. And I guess another thing that's valuable, and I was talking to somebody earlier today, is they were like, there's just so much going on with AI, I can't keep up. And I said, don't even try. Let us keep up for you. You get on Boodlebox, we will make sure the latest models, the latest assistants, the latest technology and capabilities are in there, so you don't have to keep up with it. And if it's good, we'll figure that out and we'll get it in the platform for you. And she was actually like, that's actually great. Like, I just want one place to go and know that I can find the best out there. I said, well, we want to build that and provide it to you.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for this conversation, France. I definitely took something away from your product, which is the collaborative part. And this conversation was pretty interesting. So appreciate your time.
No, thank you, Jack. And thanks for being a Boodlebox user. That's awesome.
Right on. Thanks, France.